The first time I realized something was wrong, it wasn't because anyone told me. It was because my mother's necklace wasn't where it was supposed to be. I stood in the doorway of the small, spare room we'd turned into storage after the funeral, staring at the half-open jewelry armoire like it had personally betrayed me. The house was quiet in that hollow way it had been ever since my mother passed. No background radio, no clink of dishes, no soft humming drifting down the hall. Just silence. And an empty velvet hook. My mother had worn that necklace every day for as long as I could remember. A thin gold chain with a sapphire pendant, deep blue, almost black in certain light. She used to joke that it wasn't worth much, that it only mattered because my dad gave it to her before he died. Sentimental doesn't mean expensive, she'd say, tapping it lightly, but expensive things never hold memories. I reached into the armoire and checked again. Nothing. I opened the drawers below, slowly, carefully, like if I moved too fast I'd somehow miss it. Bracelets still there, earrings neatly paired, the brooch she wore to weddings, untouched. But the necklace was gone. So was the diamond ring she'd only worn on special occasions, and the antique bracelet her grandmother brought from overseas. My stomach tightened. Not panic yet, but that sharp, instinctive dread you get when your brain hasn't caught up to what your body already knows. I stepped back and sat on the edge of the bed. This wasn't misplacement. My mother didn't misplace things, and I hadn't touched the jewelry since the day we packed it up together, before she got sick enough that we both pretended there was still time. I pulled out my phone and called my brother. He didn't answer. I tried again. Voicemail. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering, then called my aunt instead, my mother's sister, the one who'd been helping with arrangements ever since the will was mentioned. She answered on the third ring. "Yes," she said, already irritated. "Have you been in the storage room?" I asked. A pause. "What does that matter?" she replied. My grip tightened on the phone. "Because my mother's jewelry is missing." She exhaled loudly. "Oh, that. Oh." That single word dropped into my chest like a weight. "What do you mean, that?" I asked. "Well," she said, tone suddenly measured, "we didn't think you'd mind." I stood up so fast the chair scraped against the floor. "Mind what?" I demanded. "That we took care of it," she said. "You know, handled things." My heart started pounding. Handled things how? Another pause, longer this time. Then, "We sold it." The room seemed to tilt. "You did what?" I said. She sighed as if I were being difficult. It was just sitting there, and frankly, it made sense. The estate needs to be settled. The estate hasn't even gone through probate. That jewelry wasn't yours to touch. "Now don't get emotional," she said. "We all lost her." Something cold settled behind my ribs. "Who is we?" I asked. She didn't answer directly. "Your brother agreed," she said instead. "And honestly, it's better this way. Jewelry just causes arguments." I laughed once, short, disbelieving. "You sold my mother's belongings behind my back," I said, "without asking me." "We assumed you'd be too attached," she replied. "This is cleaner." Cleaner? My hands were shaking now. "Where did you sell it?" I asked. "An auction house," she said. "Reputable, don't worry." "Which one?" I pressed. "That's not important." "It's very important," I said, my voice low. She sighed again. "I'll text you the name, but you're overreacting." The line went dead. I stared at my phone, chest heaving, trying to keep my breathing even. Overreacting. That was the word they always used when I refused to quietly accept decisions made without me. My phone buzzed a moment later. Rutherford Co. Estate Auctions. I didn't sit down. I didn't cry. I grabbed my keys and left the house. The auction house was across town, tucked into a restored brick building with tall windows and polished brass handles. the kind of place that smelled faintly of old wood and money, where everything felt deliberately calm. I walked in with my coat still on, heart racing, pulse loud in my ears. A woman behind the front desk looked up and smiled politely. "Can I help you?" "Yes," I said. "I'm here about an estate consignment." She nodded. "Name?" I told her my mother's name. Her smile faltered just slightly. "One moment," she said, standing. She disappeared into a back room. I stood there staring at the glass display cases lining the walls. Jewelry glinted under soft lighting. Rings, necklaces, bracelets, arranged like they were nothing more than objects, like stories didn't cling to them. After a minute, an older man stepped out. Silver hair, sharp eyes, impeccably dressed. "Ms. Carter?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "I'm Henry Lawson, senior auctioneer." He studied my face carefully. "Please come with me." He led me into a private office, closing the door gently behind us. "You're here about the Whitmore estate. My mother's jewelry. I just found out it was sold without my consent." His expression tightened. "Sold?" he repeated. "Yes," I said. "Consigned." He didn't sit down. "That's interesting," he said slowly. I felt a flicker of something. Hope, maybe. "Why?" I asked. He glanced at a folder on his desk. "Because the consignment paperwork indicates joint authorization," he said, "but the will we were provided tells a different story." My breath caught. "What story?" I asked. He opened the folder and turned it toward me. "The jewelry," he said carefully, "was specifically bequeathed to you." The room went very still. "That's what my mother told me," I said quietly. Mr. Lawson nodded. "Then there's a problem." My phone buzzed again. A message from my brother. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." I looked at the screen, then back at the auctioneer. "Has the sale happened yet?" I asked. He met my gaze. "No," he said. "The final pieces are scheduled to go up tomorrow." Tomorrow? My stomach dropped. "Can you stop it?" I asked. Mr. Lawson didn't answer right away. Instead, he closed the folder and said something I hadn't expected at all. "I already have." I stared at him. "You what?" He folded his hands on the desk. "When questions of ownership arise," he said, "we pause everything. And when I recognized your mother's name—" He trailed off. "Recognized it how?" I asked. His eyes softened just slightly. "She was a client here," he said, "many years ago, and she was very specific." Specific? My chest tightened. "What did she say?" I asked. He reached into the folder and pulled out a single document, a letter, written in my mother's handwriting. "I believe," he said gently, "you should read this yourself." My hands shook as I reached for it, and as I unfolded the page, I realized something with chilling clarity. They hadn't just sold my mother's jewelry, they had tried to erase her last wishes. And the man standing in front of me? He wasn't about to let that happen. I sat down before my legs gave out. The chair across from Mr. Lawson's desk was firm and uncomfortable, the kind meant for short conversations, not for moments when your entire understanding of your family fractures in real time.
The letter lay open in my hands. My mother's handwriting was unmistakable, slightly slanted, deliberate, every word pressed into the page with quiet intention. She'd always written like that, careful, as if she believed words deserved respect. I swallowed and began to read. "If you are reading this, then someone has tried to move too quickly." My breath caught. Mr. Lawson remained silent, giving me the space my family never did. "I am aware that there may be pressure to simplify my estate. I do not want that." I let out a shaky breath. "Certain items, particularly my jewelry, are not to be sold, gifted, or distributed before my daughter has taken possession of them." My fingers tightened around the paper. This is not because of their monetary value. It is because they are mine to give. The room blurred for a moment. If anyone tells you otherwise, they are acting against my wishes. I lowered the letter slowly. They knew, I said hoarsely. She told them. Mr. Lawson nodded. That was my impression. I looked up at him. Then why did you accept the consignment? He didn't flinch from the question. Because the paperwork presented to us included signatures from multiple parties, including your brother's. Of course it did. But, he continued, your mother was meticulous. She deposited copies of her will, her addendums, and letters like this one with us years ago. My chest tightened. She planned for this, I said. Yes, he replied. She anticipated resistance. I laughed softly, a sad, disbelieving sound. She always did, I murmured. Mr. Lawson folded his hands. When your aunt contacted us, she insisted the sale was urgent, that there were debts, time pressure. There aren't, I said immediately. My mother was careful. She paid everything off. He nodded. That's why I paused the sale. I looked at him sharply. Before I even arrived? Yes, he said, when I reviewed your file and saw your mother's instructions. My phone buzzed again. Another message from my brother. Why are you at the auction house? Aunt Lydia said you're causing a scene. I stared at the text, then turned the phone face down on the desk. They're going to try to pressure you, I said to Mr. Lawson. They always do. They already tried, he replied calmly. My heart skipped. What did they say? That you were emotional, that you wouldn't understand business realities, that it would be easier to move forward without involving you. I let out a bitter laugh. Did they believe them? He met my gaze steadily. No. Something in his tone, quiet, certain, made my throat tighten. Thank you, I said. He inclined his head slightly. Your mother was very clear about one thing. What? I asked. That you were not to be excluded from anything. I closed my eyes briefly. That was her, even at the end, protecting me from being sidelined. What happens now? I asked. Mr. Lawson opened another folder. Formally, he said, we notify all consigners that the sale is suspended due to a verified ownership dispute. And informally? I asked. He looked at me carefully. Informally, he said, they're going to panic. I felt it then. Not fear, not grief, but something sharper. Resolve. Can I see the jewelry? I asked. He nodded. Of course. He led me down a quiet corridor into a secured viewing room. A long table stood beneath bright lights, and on it lay my mother's things, arranged, catalogued, tagged. I stopped short. There was the necklace, the sapphire pendant catching the light just as it always had when she leaned down to kiss my forehead, the diamond ring, the bracelet. I reached out but hesitated. Go ahead, Mr. Lawson said softly. I picked up the necklace. It was warm, maybe from the lights, maybe from memory. She wore this when she taught me how to drive, I whispered. She was so calm, even when I stalled. Mr. Lawson said nothing. I thought I was prepared for her to be gone, I continued. But seeing this, like it was inventory, my voice broke. He gave me a moment. Then he said, it won't be. I looked up. We'll return everything to you, he said, once the paperwork is corrected. My phone buzzed again. This time, a call. My aunt. I let it ring. It rang again. Then again. Finally, a text appeared. You are jeopardizing the entire estate. Stop this now. I stared at the words. Then I typed back. You sold something that wasn't yours. The sale is suspended. There was a pause. Then, you can't do that. I almost smiled.
I already did. By the time I left the auction house, the sun was beginning to set, the city washed in that golden hour glow that made everything look softer than it was. My phone was silent now. Too silent. I knew what that meant. They were regrouping. I drove home slowly, the letter from my mother folded carefully in my bag, the weight of it grounding me. At a red light, my phone buzzed once more. A message from my brother. "We need to talk, immediately." I didn't respond, because for the first time since my mother died, I wasn't reacting, I was choosing. They thought they could move faster than grief, faster than the law, faster than me. They were wrong. Tomorrow, the auctioneer would formally halt the sale. Tomorrow, the truth would become inconvenient. And tomorrow, my family would learn something my mother had clearly known all along. Sentiment may not have a price tag, but it has power, and I was done letting them spend it without permission. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was crying or unraveling, but because my mind wouldn't stop arranging facts into patterns. Every conversation, every hesitation, every time my aunt had stepped in to help, every time my brother had told me not to worry about details. It all lined up now. The missing jewelry wasn't a mistake, it was a decision. The first call came at 7:12 a.m. I recognized my brother's ringtone and let it ring until it stopped. I wasn't avoiding him, I was preparing. There's a difference. When people panic, they reveal more than they intend, but only if you let them speak on their terms. I made coffee, I sat at the kitchen table, I waited. The second call came 10 minutes later, then a text. "You need to call me, this is getting out of hand." Out of hand? I typed slowly. "The sale is suspended. We'll talk when you're ready to explain why you signed something you had no right to." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. I was told it was fine. I smiled without humor. By whom? This time there was a longer pause. By Aunt Lydia. She said Mom wanted the estate simplified. There it was. Simplified. The word families use when they want control without scrutiny. I set my phone down and stared at the wall for a long moment. The truth wasn't just that they sold the jewelry. It was that they'd built a story around my mother's death that conveniently removed me from the center of it. I stood, grabbed my coat, and headed out. I went straight to my mother's house. Not the storage room, not the jewelry armoire. Her desk. It was tucked into the corner of the den, a modest oak desk she'd owned longer than I'd been alive. Everyone thought it was sentimental clutter, old papers, notebooks, receipts, things no one bothered to organize because she always knew where everything was. And she did. I opened the bottom drawer. Inside was a familiar folder, thin, labeled in her neat handwriting. Estate notes. My breath caught. I carried it to the table and sat down. Inside were copies of documents I hadn't seen before. Not the will itself, but correspondence, emails printed and filed, notes to herself, lists. And there, unmistakably, was my name, repeated, underlined, highlighted. I read slowly. Spoke to Lydia today. She keeps pushing for early liquidation. I told her no. My jaw tightened. I worry she sees my things as assets instead of mine. I felt a familiar ache in my chest. Remind Henry at Rutherford that my daughter is the sole beneficiary of personal effects, jewelry especially. Henry. Mr. Lawson. I swallowed. My mother hadn't just anticipated resistance, she'd actively guarded against it. I flipped the page. If they move quickly after I'm gone, it will be because they think grief equals silence. My hands trembled slightly. I hope she doesn't let them rush her. I closed my eyes. I won't, I whispered aloud. The meeting request came just before noon. Aunt Lydia, group message. Me, my brother, and 2 cousins. We need to sit down as a family before this goes any further. I replied with one sentence. I'll meet you at Rutherford Co. tomorrow at 10 a.m. 3 immediate replies followed. Why there? That's unnecessary. This should be private. I typed back. It already isn't. The next morning, the auction house felt different, tighter, like everyone inside knew something important was about to happen. Mr. Lawson greeted me with a nod. "They're coming?" he asked. "Yes," I replied. "All of them." "Good," he said calmly. "We'll be ready." At exactly 10:07 a.m., my family walked in together. My brother looked exhausted. Aunt Lydia looked composed in that brittle way she used when she thought authority came from volume. The cousins hovered behind them, clearly dragged along to bear witness. Aunt Lydia smiled tightly when she saw me. "There you are," she said. "We were worried." I didn't respond. Mr. Lawson stepped forward. "Good morning," he said pleasantly. "Thank you for coming on such short notice." Aunt Lydia straightened. "We're here to resolve a misunderstanding." Mr. Lawson nodded. "Excellent. Then let's clarify some facts." He gestured toward the conference room. "Please." Once seated, the air changed. This wasn't a family living room. This wasn't a kitchen table where voices could overlap and reality could be blurred. This was a room built for records. Mr. Lawson opened a folder. "Let's begin with authorization," he said. Aunt Lydia waved a hand. "We've already—" He held up a finger. "No," he said calmly. "Let's begin properly." He slid a document across the table. "This," he said, "is the consignment agreement you submitted." My brother stared at it. "That's standard," Aunt Lydia said. Mr. Lawson turned the page. "And this," he continued, "is the will we were provided." He turned it toward them, "which clearly states that all personal jewelry was bequeathed solely to her." He looked at me, not for permission but acknowledgement. I nodded. Aunt Lydia frowned. "There must be an addendum." "There is," Mr. Lawson said, "and it reinforces the same instruction." My brother swallowed. "I didn't know," he said quietly. I looked at him. "Yes," I said, "you did." He flinched. "You told me Aunt Lydia said it was okay, but you didn't check. You didn't ask me. You didn't even read the will carefully." Aunt Lydia scoffed. "That's unfair." "No," Mr. Lawson said, "it's accurate." He slid another document forward. "This is a letter your mother deposited with us," he said. Aunt Lydia's face changed. Just for a moment. Recognition. "You shouldn't have that," she snapped. "We absolutely should," Mr. Lawson replied. He looked at my brother. "Did you know your mother anticipated this exact scenario?" he asked. My brother shook his head slowly. "She was very clear," Mr. Lawson continued, "that speed was not consent, and that grief was not permission." Silence filled the room. One of my cousins shifted uncomfortably. Aunt Lydia leaned forward. "We were trying to help. The estate was solvent," I interrupted. "You knew that." She snapped her gaze toward me. "You weren't handling things fast enough." I met her eyes. "You mean I wasn't letting you." Her lips pressed together. Mr. Lawson folded his hands. "Here is where things stand," he said. "The sale has been halted. All items will be returned to their rightful owner." "And if we object?" Aunt Lydia demanded. Mr. Lawson didn't raise his voice. "Then we escalate," he said, formally. My brother looked panicked now. "What does that mean?" he asked. "It means," Mr. Lawson replied, "that this becomes a legal matter involving wrongful consignment and potential fraud." The word fraud sucked the air from the room. Aunt Lydia stood abruptly. "This is outrageous." "No," I said calmly, "this is overdue." She pointed at me. "You're doing this out of spite." I shook my head. "I'm doing this because you sold my mother's last wishes like inventory." My brother rubbed his face with both hands. "I didn't think it would go this far," he muttered. I leaned toward him. "That's because you thought I'd stay quiet," I said. Mr. Lawson closed the folder. "I'll give you until the end of the day," he said, "to confirm acceptance of the return and withdrawal of consignment." "And if we don't?" Aunt Lydia asked. He met her gaze steadily. "Then the auctioneer stops being polite." They left without another word. The cousins avoided my eyes. My brother paused at the door. "I didn't mean to hurt you," he said quietly. I looked at him. "But you did. And now you need to decide what kind of person you are after this." He nodded once and left. After they were gone, I sat alone in the conference room. My hands were steady now. "You okay?" Mr. Lawson asked. "Yes," I said. "Thank you." He smiled faintly. "Your mother was formidable." I smiled too. "Yes," I said. "She was." He stood. "I'll have the jewelry prepared for return," he said, "tomorrow." I nodded. As I left the auction house, the city felt sharper, clearer. They'd thought they could act fast enough to outrun accountability. They hadn't counted on one thing. My mother had already run the race, and she'd left me a map. The fallout didn't happen all at once. It unfolded the way carefully hidden things always do, slowly at first, then all at once, and finally in a way that couldn't be undone. By the time I got home from Rutherford Co., my phone was already vibrating non-stop in my bag. I didn't look at it right away. I knew what it would be. Panic disguised as outrage, accusations dressed up as concern, people who had made decisions behind my back suddenly insisting they deserved a conversation. I set my bag down, poured myself a glass of water, and sat at my kitchen table. Only then did I check my phone. 9 missed calls, 12 unread messages, most of them from Aunt Lydia. The first few were sharp. "You embarrassed us. You blindsided your own family. This was unnecessary." Then the tone shifted. "We can fix this. You don't understand the consequences. You're letting grief cloud your judgment." And finally, the one that made my jaw tighten. "Your mother would never have wanted this kind of conflict." I stared at that message for a long time. My mother had hated conflict. That was true. She hated raised voices, slammed doors, messy endings. But she hated dishonesty more, and she hated people making decisions for her even when she was alive. I typed one response. My mother anticipated this. She prepared for it, and she trusted me. Then I turned my phone off. The next day, Mr. Lawson called me mid-morning. "They've accepted the return," he said. "No objections." I closed my eyes, exhaling slowly. "Thank you," I said. "There's more," he added. I waited. They asked if the items could still be sold privately, at a later date, with your consent. I laughed quietly. "No," I said. "Absolutely not." "I thought you might say that," he replied. "I've already declined on your behalf." That small gesture, him assuming I wouldn't compromise, meant more than he probably realized. "When can I pick everything up?" I asked. "Tomorrow," he said. "I'll have everything prepared. Properly." Properly. The word mattered. My brother showed up that evening, unannounced. He stood on my porch longer than he needed to, hands shoved into his pockets, shoulders tense like he expected the door to bite him. When I opened it, he flinched slightly, then forced a tired smile. "Can we talk?" he asked. I considered him for a moment, then stepped aside. He walked in slowly, eyes scanning my living room like it was unfamiliar territory. Maybe it was. Maybe he'd never really seen my space as mine before, just an extension of the family he thought he spoke for. "I didn't know it would turn into this," he said finally, sitting on the edge of the couch like he might bolt at any moment. I leaned against the counter, arms folded. "That's not true," I said calmly. "You just didn't think I would do anything about it." He winced. "Aunt Lydia said," he started. I don't care what she said. I care what you did. He sighed, rubbing his face. She was convincing, he admitted. She said Mom wanted things simple, that the jewelry would just cause tension. And you believed her, I said. He nodded. She also said you'd get emotional, he added quietly, that it would be easier if you weren't involved. There it was, the truth, finally spoken out loud. I felt a strange calm settle over me. So you excluded me, I said, from my own mother's belongings? He looked up. I didn't mean to hurt you, but you did. And you did it knowing it would be easier for you if I didn't find out until later. Silence stretched between us. I didn't read the will carefully, he said. I shook my head. You read it. You just didn't want to slow down. He swallowed. What happens now? He asked. I studied him. That depends on you, I said, because this isn't just about jewelry. He frowned. Then what is it about? It's about trust, I replied, and you broke it. He nodded slowly, accepting the weight of that. I'm sorry, he said. I believed he meant it, but belief doesn't restore what's been taken. I need time, I said, and I need you to stop letting Lydia speak for you. He nodded again. I will. I didn't promise anything in return. The next morning, I returned to Rutherford Co. The viewing room looked different now. The tags were gone. The items were no longer arranged like merchandise. Instead, they were laid out carefully, wrapped in soft cloth, handled with a kind of reverence I hadn't expected. Mr. Lawson stood beside the table. Everything is accounted for, he said. Nothing was sold, nothing left the building. I felt my throat tighten. I reached for the sapphire necklace first. It felt heavier than I remembered, not physically, but emotionally, like it had absorbed every conversation, every memory, every quiet moment my mother had lived while wearing it. She wore this when she told me she was sick, I said softly. Mr. Lawson nodded, giving me space. The ring came next, then the bracelet. Each piece carried a story my family had tried to reduce to a dollar amount. I signed the final paperwork. Ownership restored. Official. Undeniable. As I gathered everything, Mr. Lawson cleared his throat. There's one more thing, he said. I looked up. When your aunt contacted us initially, he continued, she attempted to rush the timeline. She insisted your mother had changed her mind near the end. My stomach tightened. Did she? No, he said firmly, and that's why your mother left additional documentation. He handed me another envelope, smaller, unmarked. I think she intended this for you, he said. I waited until I was alone in my car to open it. Inside was a single page. If this has reached you, then someone tried to decide for me. My chest ached. Please don't let them make you feel guilty for protecting what is yours. I swallowed hard. Jewelry can be sold. Trust cannot be replaced. Tears finally came then, not loud, not dramatic, just steady, inevitable grief mixed with gratitude. The family meeting Lydia had demanded never happened. Instead, the family divided quietly. Some relatives stopped answering her calls. Others distanced themselves from the situation entirely. A few reached out to me privately, apologetic, cautious, unsure where they stood now that the truth was no longer negotiable. I didn't explain myself. I didn't need to. The facts spoke loudly enough. Lydia tried one last time. She sent me an email late one night, long, emotional, filled with justifications and self-pity. She wrote about stress, about responsibility, about how hard it had been on her to manage everything. At the end, she wrote, I hope you can forgive me one day. I stared at the sentence, then closed the email. Forgiveness, I'd learned, wasn't something people could demand after taking what didn't belong to them. A week later, I placed my mother's jewelry back where it belonged, not in storage, in my room. The necklace went into a small box lined with velvet, the ring beside it, the bracelet wrapped carefully, not hidden, not displayed, just kept, safe. I sat on my bed and held the letter from the auctioneer again. They hadn't just stopped a sale, they'd honored a woman who knew exactly who might try to speak over her after she was gone. And they'd given me something my family never had. Proof that my mother saw everything, that she planned ahead, that she trusted me to finish what she started. The hardest part wasn't confronting my family. It was accepting that they'd been capable of this all along. That grief didn't change them, it revealed them. But it also revealed me. I wasn't the quiet one anymore. I wasn't the one who would understand for the sake of peace. I wasn't the one who could be rushed past. I was my mother's daughter, and I had learned exactly when to stop the sale. The first thing that surprised me after everything was settled was how quiet my life became. Not peaceful, quiet. The kind of quiet that comes after something loud has finally stopped echoing. No constant phone vibrations, no carefully worded messages asking me to reconsider, no relatives checking in under the guise of concern while fishing for information they could report back to Lydia. Just space. And in that space, I started to understand how much noise I'd been living with long before my mother died. I didn't tell anyone when I brought the jewelry home. Not my brother, not the cousins who suddenly wanted to stay neutral, not the relatives who distanced themselves from Lydia once it became inconvenient to defend her. I carried the box inside, set it on my dining table, and sat down across from it like I was meeting my mother again for the first time. The sapphire necklace caught the light when I opened the lid. The deep blue seemed darker now, older, heavier, wiser. I lifted it carefully, letting the chain slide through my fingers. I remembered the first time she let me wear it. I was 17, nervous about a school event, convinced I didn't belong in the dress I'd chosen. She'd stood behind me, fastening the clasp, her fingers steady. "This doesn't make you someone else," she'd said. "It just reminds you who you already are." I smiled faintly at the memory. She'd known. She always knew. My brother called 3 days later. I almost didn't answer. But avoidance felt like unfinished business, and I was tired of things being unfinished. "Hey," he said quietly. "Hi," I replied. There was a long pause. "I spoke to Lydia," he said. I closed my eyes. "And?" I asked. "She's furious," he admitted. "At you, at the auction house, at me." I let out a slow breath. "That's not my problem," I said. "I know," he replied quickly. "I told her that." That caught my attention. "You did?" I asked. "Yes," he said. "I told her she crossed a line." I didn't respond right away. She said Mom would have wanted the money put to good use, that the jewelry was just stuff. I felt something harden in my chest. "And what did you say?" I asked. "I said," he replied slowly, "that Mom was very clear, and that selling it without you was wrong."
There it was. Not dramatic, not grand, but honest. "That matters," I said. "I know," he replied. "I should have listened to you earlier." "Yes," I said. "You should have." He exhaled. "I'm not asking you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know I'm done letting her make decisions." I believed him. Not because of his words, but because of how tired he sounded. "We'll figure out what our relationship looks like later," I said. "Right now, I need consistency." "I understand," he said. And for the first time since my mother died, I felt like I wasn't speaking into a void. Lydia didn't stop. Not entirely. People like her never do. But her attempts changed shape. Instead of confrontation, she shifted to narrative. She told people she'd been misunderstood, that grief had clouded everyone's judgment, that I was struggling and lashing out, that I'd been manipulated by an auctioneer who saw an opportunity. I heard all of this secondhand, from cousins who didn't know what to say to me anymore, from relatives who thought repeating it with a sympathetic tone made it less insulting. I didn't correct them. I didn't argue. I let the truth exist without defending it, because the truth doesn't need constant reinforcement. It only needs consistency, and mine never changed. The legal side concluded quietly. A formal letter arrived from Rutherford Co, confirming the termination of consignment and documenting that the items had never been offered publicly or sold. It was clinical, dry, final. I filed it away with my mother's estate documents, right next to the copy of her will and the handwritten notes she'd left behind. Paper matters. My mother understood that. I took time off work after that, not because I was overwhelmed, but because I needed to be present for something I'd been postponing. Grief. Real grief. The kind that doesn't compete with emergencies or family drama. The kind that sits with you when there's nothing left to fix. I went through her clothes slowly. Not to donate right away, not to decide what stayed or went, just to touch them. Her sweaters still smelled faintly like her soap. Her scarves were folded the way she'd always folded them, precise and habitual. In one coat pocket, I found a receipt from a grocery store, dated just weeks before she died. Milk, bread, apples. Ordinary life, paused mid-sentence. I cried then.
For her, not for the betrayal, not for the fight, just for the absence. One afternoon, while organizing her papers, I found a notebook I hadn't seen before. Thin, blue, tucked behind old tax documents. Inside were lists, not of assets, of intentions. Call her more often. Tell her the truth even when it's uncomfortable. Make sure she knows where everything is. I traced the ink with my finger. She'd been thinking about me, planning for me. Not in a controlling way, in a protective one. The realization settled deep in my chest. My mother hadn't just prepared for death, she'd prepared for interference. The next time Lydia reached out, it was through a letter, handwritten, pages long. I read it once, then again. She wrote about sacrifice, about responsibility, about how she'd held the family together for years, how ungrateful it felt to be questioned now, how hurt she was that I'd turned outsiders against us. Not once did she apologize. Not once did she acknowledge selling something that wasn't hers. At the end, she wrote, "I hope one day you'll understand I did what I thought was best." I folded the letter carefully. Then I put it away. Understanding wasn't the problem. Accountability was. Months passed. The jewelry stayed untouched, safe in its box. I didn't wear it yet. Not because I was afraid, but because I wanted the first time to mean something. I waited until a day when grief felt quieter, less sharp, until a morning when I woke up and thought of my mother without immediately reaching for the ache. That day came unexpectedly. I was getting ready for a small dinner with friends. Nothing fancy, just people who had shown up for me without an agenda. I opened the box, lifted the necklace, fastened it around my neck. The weight was familiar, comforting. When I caught my reflection, I didn't see someone clinging to the past. I saw continuity. At the dinner, someone complimented it. "That's beautiful," they said. "Thank you," I replied. It was my mother's. No explanation, no defense, just truth. The final consequence for Lydia came quietly, not in a courtroom, not in a confrontation, in distance. Family gatherings happened without her. Invitations slowed. Phone calls went unanswered. People who'd once deferred to her now changed the subject when she spoke. She noticed. People like her always do. She reached out to me one last time, through my brother. "She wants to talk," he said cautiously. I thought about it, then shook my head. "No," I said. "She already said everything she wanted to say." "And you?" he asked. I smiled faintly. "I said what mattered when I stopped the sale." The truth about inheritance isn't money. It's permission. Permission to remember. Permission to keep. Permission to honor someone the way they wanted, not the way others find convenient. They sold my late mother's jewelry behind my back. They thought speed would protect them. They thought grief would quiet me. They thought legality could be bent if no one objected fast enough. They didn't count on one thing. My mother had already chosen her witness. And when the auctioneer stopped the sale, it wasn't because of sentiment. It was because intention leaves a trail, and my mother made sure hers was impossible to erase. I still wear the necklace now. Not every day, but on days when I need to remember who I come from, who taught me to stand still when others rush, who understood that silence can be dangerous if it replaces consent, who trusted me to finish what she started. The jewelry was never about value. It was about voice, and they learned, too late, that some voices don't disappear when the person is gone. They echo. They stop sales. They change outcomes, and they remind you exactly where you stand.